Hello, welcome to the channel Flesh to the Father. Today's video I'm going to be explaining why Hinduism is better than the Abrahamic religions, part 2. Now the reason I do this video is because I did one before saying why the Bhagavad Gita is better than Abrahamic religions, and some Hindus mentioned that I should read the Upanishads, and I read them or listened to them on my Audible, and again it is brilliant scriptures, because it's not focusing on the external, is focusing on the internal. And I was thinking the other day about there is so much beauty in Christianity, especially the New Testament, and obviously the main thing is Jesus Christ. There's so much beauty in it, but the problem I have with the Old Testament, with parts of the New Testament, with Revelation especially, and with a lot of the prophecies in Islam is there's so much focus on the external. Like if you look at Christianity, it's all about Jesus dying for your sins, and it's all about a spiritual warfare outside of us, and we have to do these things to get to heaven. And in Judaism and Christianity and Islam, there's all these prophecies of an end time battle and all this stuff that everyone worries about for the last, probably you're looking at 2, 3, 4,000 years if you go all the way back to the Jews. And all of these people who've lived through these times have been focusing on this end time battle and judgment, end of the world. They're all waiting for this special time to come. And all of them have wasted their lives if that's what they were focusing on. And I was thinking how Christianity, my two problems with it is, one, all the end times prophecy stuff, which I personally believe is a lot of it is made up and a lot of it is misconstrued nonsense. And the other problem I have is that I don't believe that they have the correct idea of Jesus. Now, obviously, who am I to say? But let's just look at it logically. There is a truth of Jesus that only God and Jesus know, because only the people around the time know. But if Christians have any doubt, look at the Muslims. They've made up their own version of Jesus. And I've been reading recently about how they're saying that Christianity really is Paul's invention. Whether for good or bad, it's not necessarily, that's up for debate. I actually agree with a lot of Paul's teachings, especially when he focuses on the spiritual side. So I'm not against Paul. But ultimately, Paul made up this idea of Jesus and dying for the sins and stuff when apparently, I'll put a link to the talk below, apparently Jesus' early followers and disciples and brothers were very wary of Paul. And they were saying, you're teaching a different Jesus. So this idea of Jesus, only the truth is known by God. Whereas for me, though, Jesus dying on the cross for the sins to save us from hell and Satan, all that stuff doesn't make any sense to me. Now, is he divine? He could be. Was he just a man and a great teacher and a prophet sent? He could be. I don't know the absolute truth. I'm torn in between. But back to the topic on why I believe the Gita and the Upanishads are so much better. Mainly because the reason that they always pointing you back to within. And that is the ultimate spiritual battle is not externally, it's internally. And the fate, or not the fate of our soul, but the reason we come into this world is to build our soul. Or maybe even that's speculation. But the point is, our battle is within, it's not externally. See, we're trying to heal the world by fighting all these politicians and all this stuff and religious war. But the real battle is within. The real evil is within us. It's not even Satan. Satan is there to tempt us. And our goal is to overcome the temptations, to overcome the Satan. And it's not some kind of evil thing like the Christians and the Muslims think it is, but the battle is to overcome the evil within us and the temptations within us. Because how come some people cheat on their wives and husbands, some don't? Because it's pulling out evil within us. How evil are we? And the ultimate goal of life is to return from, not be tempted by the fleshly temptations, but to return to the Father and go by his spirit. And I also think that religion cuts you off from God. An interesting thing when I gained understanding myself, but also what the spiritual teachings from the Gita and the Upanishads and other spiritual teachings, even like Christian Jewish mysticism as well, have taught me that you have to awaken the inner spirit. In Christianity, it would be called the inner Christ. In Hinduism is called the inner self. But once you awaken that, then you return to the Father, or you're aware of the Father. And the way you awaken it is you have to like fast and meditate, because then you still the flesh, you overcome the flesh. But then you also have to overcome the mind, which means you have to wipe your mind clean in a way, in terms of you have to let go of your ego identity. And the problem with religion is it gives you an ego identity. So I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian. Even if you took Hinduism to an extreme and obsessed with being a Hindu, and I am aware that there are some kind of prophecies and stuff in Hinduism, but I'm talking about purely just the scriptures. And you need to overcome the ego. And when you're obsessed with religion, you can't overcome the ego. And then you're not, or what, you can't awaken the self. The inner self only awakens when you turn from the flesh and you turn from the ego. And that's when the spirit awakens. Because I always thought it was strange that, like in Islam, they do a lot of, they pray every day and they fast. I was thinking, well, how come they're not awakening to the truth? Because they've only done one part of the two parts. The second part means to drop their beliefs. And once you drop all beliefs and you wipe the slate clean, then the self awakens and you return to the true Father rather than believing in an idea of God. And even if this idea is somewhat true, it's not about believing in it, it's about knowing it and then bringing that love from that into the world, rather than all these religious ideas of God, which obviously causes a lot of wars and violence, rather than peace and the kingdom of heaven into earth, as Jesus Christ said. Okay, and I'm going to end the video with a 1-minute part from the Upanishads that I think sums it up quite well. And it's just a little bit of the wisdom. And I'd advise everyone to read the Gita and the Upanishads. And the beauty is they're very short as well. If you read them without all the introductions and stuff that people put along with them, you can read the Gita in like an hour and a half if you put it on a reasonably quick speed. And the Upanishads maybe 2-3 hours. So I'm going to end the video with a 1-minute part here. And usual stuff, subscribe, and God bless everyone. Listen up here. Goodbye.
Hidden in the heart of every creature exists the self, subtler than the subtlest, greater than the greatest. They go beyond all sorrow, who extinguish their self-will and behold the glory of the self, through the grace of the Lord of Love. Though one sits in meditation in a particular place, the self within can exercise his influence far away. Though still, he moves everything, everywhere. When the wise realize the self, formless in the midst of forms, changeless in the midst of change, omnipresent and supreme, they go beyond sorrow. The self cannot be known through study of the scriptures, nor through the intellect, nor through hearing discourses about it. The self can be attained only by those whom the self chooses. Verily unto them does the self reveal himself. The self cannot be known by anyone who desists not from unrighteous ways, controls not the senses, stills not the mind, and practices not meditation. None else can know the omnipresent self, whose glory sweeps away the rituals of the priest and the prowess of the warrior, and puts death itself to death.